you want to talk about this whole drama situation between Epic and Google and the current status of that.
Oh boy, oh boy. Oh yes, sir. All right, so Epic Games is back once again with their lawsuits. They in the past they've sued Google, they've sued Apple, but now there's a new lawsuit against both Google and Samsung, and this is for uh, an accusation of illegally uh, working together to block competition on the app stores. And so, what here's essentially what Epic is saying on their page, saying that we are filing a court case against Google and Samsung over coordinated efforts to block competition in app distribution on Samsung devices with Samsung's default auto blocker feature. Auto blocker is the latest in a long series of dealings in which Google and Samsung have agreed not to compete to protect Google's monopoly power. Autoblocker cements the Google Play Store as the only viable way to get apps on Samsung devices, blocking every other store from competing on a level playing field. And then it's essentially just a whole lot of stuff that they're talking about here, and just a sort of a formal letter. Here's what they're saying. There's what Epic wants. We are asking the court to prohibit Samsung's and Google's anti-competitive and unfair conduct and mandate that Samsung eliminate the auto blocker by default and enable competition. The jury's decision was unanimous and clear. Google's agreements with OEMs to block competition are illegal. This applies not only to Google, but to the device manufacturers that collude with them. We will take all necessary steps to ensure this decision is fully upheld. And yeah, so there's that. And I believe this is a follow-up to that case, because recently, sometime after that, Google was ordered to open its Android App Store to competitors, and it will have to allow it'll essentially allow several different things. One thing is that Google will not be allowed to pay developers to launch apps first or exclusively through the Play Store. It will be barred from offering manufacturers or carriers incentives to pre-install Google Play or to not pre-install rival stores on new devices. The company won't be able to force app makers to use Google Play billing. It may not require developers to set a price based on whether Google Play is used, and Google won't be able to restrict developers from pointing users to external payment options outside of the Play Store. And this mandate goes into effect starting November 1st of 2024. And it's for a 3-year period in the US. So there's that. I have several different things sort of juggling back and forth, I will say, but I'll let you go ahead and get this started.
All right. Well, as usual, Tim Sweeney's being a big fat crybaby. And that is me saying this as a fat guy. No, I mean, he's obviously not actually fat. But seriously, this is like, he's basically saying, Google, how dare you? How dare you? How dare you make it impossible for people to not impossible. How dare you make it more difficult for people to be able to download our app without having security features to keep it from happening? I mean, it's like, literally, it's a security feature, because if people go onto the website and they just automatically download something, it's like auto blocking that thing is for the customer's protection, to keep their phone from getting hacked, from people downloading malicious applications, all that sort of stuff. They put that on by default because they know that some people are completely undiscerning. In fact, a lot of people are completely undiscerning. They'll just download whatever they want, and there's a whole lot of issues that can come with that. People can very easily have their phones hacked. They could have all of their data stolen. I mean, there's just like a whole can of worms that could happen if they didn't have that present. They have to have that feature present. And I'm pretty sure that Apple probably does something similar, would be my guess, because I can't imagine. I mean, like for all the things I have negative to say about Apple, security is not one of them. I think that their security is great. Other than the fact that sometimes they can make it a real pain in the butt to be able to unlock devices that were owned by a deceased family member. as I've experienced, you have to have a court order in order to be able to access that information. It's like, okay, you're protecting the data. That's great. It's really irritating, though, for family members who are trying to get onto their parents' old devices or, what have you. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. With this whole thing with Epic, though, it's like, okay, Google and Samsung do have these security settings set up by default in order to help protect customers, help protect their data, all of that. And Epic doesn't like that, because that makes it so that people have a more difficult time being able to get their app store so that they can download Fortnite and so on and so forth. Now, the thing is that this is actually something that's pretty easy to turn off, because it's on by default, but it's not difficult to turn off if people want to be able to download the Epic Games Store, which is garbage, or any other number of additional stores. Now, where I will say that I agree, well, I should say, I don't agree with Epic on this front, but I do think that the idea of Google being ordered to allow additional store platforms to be downloadable through Google Play, I think that's reasonable. I think that's something that they should do, because that would help to deal with these security issues. That way it gives people a way to get these alternate storefronts. However, I also understand at the same time the reason why they wouldn't want to do it, because of competition. Now, I think that Google needs to have competition, because for all the great things about Google, they're also some of the worst, one of the worst corporations, companies, whatever. I don't even know what you would call them. They're just so unbelievably massive in terms of free speech and censorship and everything else. And it's just like, it's insane what they do. But I mean, the reality is that even if they start doing like the Epic Games Store that you can get through Google Play, so that people can do their alternate payment methods and give their information to Chinese hackers, which is essentially what they're doing by getting the Epic Games Store, or rather just giving it to the CCP, I guess I should say, is more accurate. Giving their information to the CCP. The reality is that if the product is good enough, people will download it. As long as Google does their due diligence and makes sure that they're not allowing things to be on their store that are malicious, as much as I could easily argue that the Epic Games Store is malicious, then it should be fine. So, I mean, Google, of course, is appealing this decision for the 3-year period that would begin on November 1st of this year. Some of the other things, like basically making it so Google can't make stuff exclusive to their store, I think that's also good. That they would be ordered to do that. I think Google needs to not be a monopoly so much, because they pretty much are for the most part. I don't think it's necessarily a problem from the standpoint of making it like the default store on Android and everything else. I mean, like, for example, my phone is a Samsung, and it has both Google Play and a Samsung store on it by default. Makes sense for both. The only one I've ever used is Google Play. I don't really buy anything through them. I pretty much, the only thing I download, like, I'll download various apps, mostly for like stores or Bible apps, various other things like that. Just like, there's a handful of applications that I have, but mostly it's just like, okay, this is grocery shopping, or this is to do two-factor authentication for getting into VPN at work or what have you, or clocking in and clocking out. But yeah, I just think Epic is being a big baby about this whole thing. And while I do think that some of what the court is ordering is reasonable, and is actually probably more of a good thing, I also think that what Epic is asking for with removing the auto blocker for these things by default, instead of saying there's a way to turn this off if you need to, I think that that is stupid, and I really hope that Epic loses that aspect of it. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I definitely agree a whole lot with what you said. This is definitely Tim Sweeney being a huge hypocrite, because how do you say that Google is being anti-competitive by not allowing Epic to have its way on Android phones, and yet Tim Sweeney does not want games to be sold outside of the Epic Games Store, and goes out of his way to make those games exclusive to the Epic Games Store. Something that could be considered anti-competitive? Huh. Oh my goodness. And
Shock.
Also, considering this, he says that Google is a monopoly because it has such a foothold, and also, to a lesser degree, Samsung, in the mobile market. And yet, he goes out of his way to criticize Linux and despises Linux, and only wants something to do with it only with Windows and Microsoft, even though that could be considered the monopoly of the PC environment. And it's also funny because there were several times where he was complaining about something on Windows, and then someone posted a screenshot about like their desktop environment. He said, "Oh wow, that looks really cool. How did you get that to happen?" And then someone said, "This is on Linux." But the point though is the fact that whenever someone tries to actually do something that is, or present something that could be considered, that it encourages competition, whether it's through selling on Steam or supporting Linux, he completely shuts those things down because he only wants a monopoly on his end. He doesn't want to be a part of someone else's monopoly. Yeah. So it's a huge hypocritical thing for him to say that in that regard. And of course, like I just said, buying up exclusives of, and I always like to bring this up. The fact that after one indie game, the game was called Darkwood. Not Darkwood. It was oh gosh, I can't remember what it was, but the game, even though the developer of this game, he said he was going to release it on Steam, because that was something that he was promised through a Kickstarter. But then when he went to Epic said that the game could only be brought to the Epic Game Store if it was made a temporary exclusive. And the guy had enough integrity to say, "No, I will not do that because I promised my backers that the game would be on Steam upon launch." And because of that, the game was blacklisted from the Epic Game Store because he would not bow down to Epic's demands. So the fact that Tim Sweeney has the nerve to say all this stuff, but look at the skeletons in his closet. It's insanely hypocritical from him to do that. But like you said, there is a silver lining here with the demands that with what has happened with Google, because I agree. I think that I also agree with what you said about the fact that having these auto blockers in place is not necessarily a bad thing. It prevents people from doing something stupid. It protects people who are not knowledgeable, especially if you say you had a kid who said, "Oh, I'm gonna download free Minecraft for my phone." Then a whole lot of bad stuff could happen on the phone. But I don't necessarily have a problem with that in practice. The fact that you can disable this is great. I think that's good. And like you said with Apple, it's hard to get a virus or some sort of problem, because Apple does, even though it's a walled garden, it is a wall, and it is hard to bypass that. And I will say though that this is also good because, for all intents and purposes, Google does not really curate its store, and the fact that you have stuff that could possibly even be malware on the sites, on the store is insane. So having the ability to get apps off outside of the store is great, and definitely I encourage it. I mean, I don't really use the Google Play Store. I primarily just use like F-Droid, or I just like sideload apps from sites and whatnot. But being able to actually, or to give developers the option to expand outside of the Google Play Store is great. Definitely, and I also really like the fact that, you know, with say the Google Play billing not being required, because there is one app that I use on desktop, and you know, I use like my own, like I use a virtual card there. I would have to, if I were to use it on through the Google Play Store, I would have to actually use a Google Play account, and I don't want to put a card, even if it was say a virtual card. I don't want to use the Google Billing Play thing. I really just not care for that. So if having that restriction removed would be great for me, just because I can just directly pay the developer as I see fit and not have to use Google services. And I really hope that this, you know, the fact that certain things like Google Play is incentivized or will be forbidden to be pre-installed onto phones. I'm hoping technically we could also maybe get to the point where the operating system the bootkits for the phones might also be unlocked for users, because in order to actually de-Google a phone or just to install your own operating system, you either have to buy a Google phone specifically, because those actually are completely unlocked, or you actually have to import an international phone version. Like I had to import a European version of the Samsung S9 just so I could install my own operating system on there, because the US versions are completely blocked off. So I like the things that are coming out of this lawsuit, but at the same time, I completely disagree with Epic's reasoning for this lawsuit to begin with. I think it's ridiculous considering the claims that or not the claims, but the things that they've done does not match what they're saying Google is doing here.
Right.
Or it is matching, but it's just a reflection of what they're doing. But yeah, so that's pretty much what I have to say there.
Yep, all good points. Epic is just absurdly hypocritical on this whole front, and of course, you know, the fact that they're asking Google and Samsung to make their phones less secure is just stupid. Yeah, Tim Sweeney is a big baby. That's all there is to it. He is.